I think at the end of the day, the opportunity here not to be missed is to really leverage your courageous leadership for kids.
Hey, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to this edition of Future Ready's podcast, Leading Through Unprecedented Times. So excited to have Dr. Jenny McGown here. Jenny, I have seen your work. I've seen you with your staff. You lead Klein, an incredible school district in Texas. It is such an honor to have you here today. Can you take a moment and just introduce yourself?
Yes, well, thank you so much, Tom. And it is a joy that we've been able to partner together in some work, and just really respect you and appreciate this opportunity. I am so thankful that I get to serve every day as the superintendent in Klein ISD. We're a district of over 54,000 students. We have over 7,000 employees, and there are about 250,000 people living within the boundaries of our school district. So this is a wonderful place to have a lot of opportunity to do a lot of good things for kids and for our community.
Absolutely. And I love the pride you always exude when you talk about your staff, and I've seen it in person, and you truly are proud to lead such a large community in that regard, but a large community, lots of opportunity there too. So Jenny, let me ask you this, at the end of last school year, so much uncertainty, we asked teachers to really transform what they did overnight, and really they did it and found a way to rise for kids. What are some lessons that you learned, through COVID-19? We're still in the midst of the pandemic, but as you closed last school year, just things that were on your mind, things that maybe you didn't anticipate, just some lessons learned really at the end of last year.
Yeah, so every challenge brings great opportunity, right? And I think that certainly the challenges that were presented from setting up a virtual school district overnight for the number of students that we serve, and just trying to make sure that we provided a really excellent and equitable learning experience for students was definitely no easy task. But I think that some of the best lessons that have come out of this moment are really about things that we always know to be true. Like, one of the things that we've talked a lot about on our team is how engagement really does begin with empathy. And that's true for students, that's true for families, that's true for our community, for our teachers, that if you really want to engage people, no matter what the context is, whether you're engaging people virtually or trying to engage them in a more traditional setting, that starting from a place of empathy is a really, really powerful place for good things to grow. And so as we had to navigate all the different challenges that came with keeping our students fed, making sure, of course, that their academic needs were met, thinking about how to meet their socio-emotional needs, that was the thing that we just kept coming back to, is like, if you really want to engage people, you've got to be empathetic about what people are going through, how they may be experiencing things. Got to recognize that how they're experiencing it may not be how you're experiencing it, and that if we can go back to that simple truth, no matter what particular challenge we're navigating, we'll probably make better progress and deeper progress if we start with a lot of empathy for the people we serve.
Yeah, I love that, leading with that empathy lens for sure. When we look at some of the things, some of the concerns I've heard from parents, or we see online, or articles out there, concerns around this idea about learning loss. We at Future Ready, we're so in tune with the whole child and looking, it's not just about data points or test scores, but when we look at the last maybe third of the school year, quarter of the school year that have really been affected, what are you doing and inclined to really look at any of those gaps, any of those achievement opportunity gaps, to make sure as we look forward, kids really have what they need? So how are you evaluating kind of that learning loss based on a year where there was a lot of unknowns and a lot of things that we just did differently?
Absolutely. So of course, we're doing all the things that I expect most people are doing across the country, which is adjusting our scope and sequence for our curriculum, really thinking about what is essential that students are able to master, that they know and are able to do in order to continue making progress on their learning path. So that's some of the, behind the scenes work that's happening right now as we prepare for the next school year. But in addition to that, keeping safety and the health and wellness of our employees and our students and their families in mind, we're trying to think about what are some of the step-up opportunities that we can create for students prior to the start of the school year, to be able to engage with them, to be able to assess, particularly our students who we knew were already behind before COVID-19, or already struggling and had different gaps. What are some of the opportunities we can create to start to address those things? As well as to assess them, because although we did have different checkpoints through our at-home learning experience, there's nothing like being able to really be with a student and to engage engage with them, to have conversation and dialogue around their learning, to figure out what they really have a good ownership and grasp of, and what they are going to need a lot of support with in order to keep them progressing in their path.
Yeah, well said. And as we look towards next year, there's so much uncertainty. At the time of this recording, states have given kind of minimal guidance in terms of what those expectations will be. But certainly as a superintendent, you're starting to think through some of the what ifs. You're starting to look at a handful of pieces because we don't really know which direction we're going to have to go at this point. What are some of those what ifs? What are some of the things you're looking at as you look towards next year when we open?
Absolutely. So we are deeply engaged in the work of planning for multiple scenarios, because we know that this is a very unpredictable situation in a district our size. It's very possible next year that we could even have multiple scenarios for learning happening all at the same time. And so in terms of, bringing people together around that work, that is definitely well underway. But one of the things that we asked early on in the design process is, what do we want to be true no matter what scenario our students are learning in next year? To try to center on the idea that, yes, circumstances are going to change. State guidance may change. We may get different recommendations one day from this group and another set of recommendations from a different group the next day. And so we really landed on 3 core components of every scenario. One of them is, of course, around health and wellness, making sure that we think deeply about what it means to keep our people physically and emotionally well as we go through these times. We have centered in on having an excellent and equitable learning experience for our students. And so being very clear about what is essential and allowing students to move through a competency-based progression on the journey, but not just academically, also in a lot of the things that bring students joy at school, like their extracurriculars. So making sure it's excellent and equitable learning experience no matter what scenario we're in. And then just, of course, safe operations and systems, that no matter what scenario we're in, we're going to continue to prioritize the safety of our kids, our families, and our employees in our community. So that's really helped us, is to think about, yes, there's lots of different scenarios to be planned and thought through, but if we can really anchor on what we want to be true and what we commit to be true no matter what, that's a great foundation to build on.
Yeah, absolutely is, and so well said there, and just such massive things. And as listeners are listening to the podcast here, I hope they appreciate just the amount of things and the volume of things that superintendents and other leaders have on their plate, that they're really trying to wrestle with so many what ifs, and as you said, maybe even multiple what ifs in the same scenario that we could look towards this fall. So kudos to that. I have no doubt you'll lead the way there. Let me ask you this though. One of the things I've really respected about you, and seeing you with your staff and watching you with the leaders that you serve, I recognize the value you have in people, and the value that you have for your teachers, and supporting them in all of this is so vital. And so talking about professional learning, what does that look like over the past couple months? Has that shifted? What do you anticipate moving forward, and how we can support teachers in all of this work?
Absolutely. So as we were building our at-home learning experience for our students, one of the things we knew was an absolute prerequisite was providing support for our employees, and particularly our teachers. We're very fortunate. As you know, we have a lot of folks in the district who have already been investing very deeply in digital learning and see that as a key lever that they can pull when they're personalizing learning for students. And we also have teachers that bring unbelievable talents and skills to the table every day, but having to teach in a virtual environment was not something they were prepared to transfer into so rapidly. And so one of the first things we did was really set up quality online professional learning experiences for our teachers and really for all of our staff, so they knew even just how to have a Zoom meeting. When you're always able to just walk down the hall or drive to a building, you may not have had to learn to use these things. And so that was something I was really proud of, is just the spirit of, we call it being a forever learner in Klein ISD, but the way that our employees were forever learners trying to hone their craft and pivot so rapidly was amazing. And then I think this summer, we're continuing in a virtual format, which has been a lot of fun, transforming huge, as you've been to, like our Reimagine Learning Summit, where we have all of our educators across the district learning in multiple locations. So that will be all online this year. We're have a huge leadership retreat this week that's all online, and so continuing there. But then as we think about a scenario in the future where we will be making tremendous improvements to the at-home learning experience we created in an emergency, if we end up having to have a distance learning scenario in play, we're thinking about what are all the ongoing supports that we need to make sure that we provide our teachers and our staff, so that they can have that personal efficacy that they can do this, that transfers to their students, so that they they believe, yes, we can do this together.
Yeah. So Jenny, one of the words that you've said multiple times, equity or equitable, and I know that's core to your work. I know that's something that I've heard you say many, many times over. It's core to our work at Future Ready Schools. And so how are you prioritizing our most at-risk students, our most marginalized groups, especially in the midst of a pandemic, looking forward, how do we keep those groups at the forefront?
Absolutely. Well, we try to keep those groups at the forefront every single day. We right at the heart of our mission in Klein ISD, we talk about equity as knowing every student by name, strength, and need, and then leveraging all of our collective resources to be able to build on their strengths and to be able to address their needs. So we're building on that foundation. What I will say is when we think about equity in practice, not just on paper, we're thinking about how do we make sure that every child and family, because as we continue to plan for the future, to remember that families have always been a critical partner for our students in their education, but when you're learning at home in some of these scenarios, that becomes an even more critical partnership, as you and I both know, having school-age children, to be able to support them. So we're working through how do we make sure that they all have the resources they need to find their, what we call purpose in the district, building on their promise. It goes everything from making sure that we continue to put our folks that are very skilled at getting more than expected growth outcomes with our students who need more than expected growth. Just simple things like that are part of our regular practice, making sure that we do all the practical things like expanding our Wi-Fi reach, making sure that students have devices. But more than anything, what we're excited about is the opportunity to actually be back in some form full-time in the 2021 school year so that we can get a really good gauge on where students are struggling, and then do what educators always do, which is enter in to try to fill those gaps and to, again, leverage the strengths that every student bring to the table, while also making sure that we're just working like crazy people to try to help folks catch up in the things they need to catch up on.
Yeah, and I'll reiterate the shout out to parents and all the parents and grandparents and all the different folks from different family structures that have supported students over the last number of months, and always do too. But I think we've really gained an additional appreciation for that during these months. That's for sure. Jenny, I look at you as somebody that's just so humanistic in nature, values people. How do we make sure that relationships and the people side of things remain core to all of our decision making and all of our work?
Gosh, yeah, I think at the end of the day, right? I mean, if we don't honor the humanity in our midst and try to think about, again, like I said before, how people are experiencing things, then we have a very difficult time truly meeting their needs. When we enter into conversations or we enter into spaces with a lot of assumption and bias, we miss the opportunity to really understand where somebody is coming from. And I don't just mean in conflict, I mean like in our day-to-day opportunities to build relationships with folks. But that's one of the things that I'm so proud of our team here in Klein ISD. I mean, from the moment this started, before we had anything designed with curriculum, before we had anything designed with meal service. I mean, we were working as quickly as we could, but nobody had to say to our teachers and our principals, hey, start reaching out to your kids and make sure they're okay. And nobody had to give some sort of directive about that. That's just who educators are. And so continuing to just honor that, to thank them for that, to say that that's at the top of the list. It's the entry point for every other thing that we do. Is just something that we talk about Klein family. That's what we mean, that like we're a family and we're going to take care of one another. And above all else, the kind of community care that I see in Klein ISD is something that brings me so much pride and so much joy every day, even in the difficult times.
That's awesome. And I'm proud to say I've seen it firsthand there too. And I couldn't agree more. So one final question for you. So there you are, superintendent of a very large district in Texas. Whether I'm a principal in a small rural school building, whether I'm a superintendent of a small or large school or large district like yourself, what's one piece of advice you have for educators as they look towards next year, as we march forward, lots of uncertainty and fear still out there? What's one piece of advice you have for them?
I think at the end of the day, the opportunity here not to be missed is to really leverage your courageous leadership for kids. I think most people are wired that way in education anyway. They want to do the courageous thing for our students, but there is always the temptation in the midst of so much uncertainty just to gravitate back to the status quo and just to go back to what's comfortable. And so I guess my encouragement to leaders in education right now would be like, be courageous. Don't recreate systems that we know historically have driven inequities deeper into the learner's experience. Like, use this moment with all the challenges that it brings and with all the sleepless nights that are certainly part of our regular experience right now. Don't miss the opportunity to just re-energize your own personal leadership, but also to recreate those things that we have known for such a long time are not working for every student, and continue to be bold in saying that every is going to be, that's in Klein ISD, we talk about every, and that's what we mean, that we know not just a big mass of people or students or families, but we know every student by name, strength, and need, and we do everything we can to celebrate those strengths and to meet those needs, whatever they look like and wherever they are. So I would say be brave, be courageous, and go forth and do excellent, excellent work for every student in your care.
Well, I certainly can't say it any better than that. That's for sure. That's Dr. Jenny McGown, everybody. Jenny, thank you so much for your time today, and keep leading the way.
Thank you so much.